Today we'll discuss George Marsden's book, The Outrageous Idea of Christian Scholarship. In it, Marsden argues that scholars who have religious faith should be reflecting on the intellectual implications of that faith and bring those reflections into the mainstream of intellectual life. Marsden believes that these Christian perspectives and the perspectives of other religious groups be accepted as legitimate in mainstream academics. It also seeks to explain how, without resorting to dogmatism, Christian faith can be of great relevance to contemporary scholarship of the higher standards. In the first chapter, Marsden analyzes the reasons why Christian perspectives are not welcome in dominant academic culture. He contends that today there's no realistic prospect for the return of the dominance of Christianity in America's leading universities, but yet the biases against speaking about Christian perspectives persist. He argues that in a place of Protestant establishment, we now have a virtual establishment of non-belief. In Chapter 2, Marsden discusses what he refers to as the rise of the dogma of separation of church and state. He claims that religious expression suffered from what he calls the old liberalism that dominated most of the 20th century intellectual life. Chapter 3 argues that traditional religious viewpoints can be just as hospitable to scientifically sound investigation as many other viewpoints. Marsden contends that all of these viewpoints are ultimately grounded in some faith or another. He asserts that religious perspectives should be recognized as legitimate in the mainstream academy as long as their proponents are willing to support the rules necessary for a constructive exchange of ideas in a diverse setting. In the next two chapters, Marsden explores how Christian scholarship can make a difference without scholars having to quote Bible verses or claiming to read God's providence. Chapter 4 outlines some of the ways in which scholars should expect Christian perspectives to have real impact. The next chapter builds on that base to suggest how some central Christian theological claims might reshape other academic thought. Marsden points out that while God and theology should be considered as factors in scholarship, Christian scholars do not want to reduce their subjects to just their theological elements. The final chapter argues that contemporary Christian scholarship will not realize its potential unless it can establish a strong institutional base. Marsden points out that scholars depend on communities. He argues that if like-minded academics do not form their own sub-communities, then they will be dependent entirely on the communities that already exist. According to the author, these communities have little place for inquiry concerning faith and learning. For disclosure purposes, I am not a Christian. I came to Liberty University for the better tuition rates and the 8-week classes. I do have a strong belief in God, but I do not subscribe to any organized religion. I believe in what the author calls the dogma of the separation of church and state. If an institution claims to be secular, I don't believe that the students should be required to hear the religious perspective of their professor unless they ask. I do believe that students of all religions should be able to have a platform and be able to share their views in an open class discussion without the fear of being ridiculed. Universities such as Liberty are available for students who seek a Christian worldview. After reading Marsden, I'm curious to know, do Christian universities welcome atheist professors to give their perspectives on religion? I'm guessing they do.